I'm really impressed with both the insights and the discipline of all of our speakers. We're going to, because of their ability to stay on time with their insights, we are going to be able to have time for questions within this panel, and I hope that you will be thinking of them as our last speaker begins her remarks. Cheryl Head.
Thank you.
From the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Thank you. I hope I'm going to share both some strategic insights, but some tactics for success around outreach. I've been in touch with most of the projects that have been talked about here. Danny has a proposal, I think, into me. Now, I didn't know what you look like. Now I know what you look like. Okay, that's good. I'm just going to clip through my notes here. They may not be linear, but I hope they will be useful to you. I think a good outreach campaign really does start with a product, and I'm saying product because we're thinking more and more, at least at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, not about programs as much as content and the specific and right kind of content, which means it could be a 90-minute documentary, it could be a 5-minute interstitial, depending on what you're after. But it requires a compelling story and or compelling characters within whatever content you start with, I think, when we're talking about program outreach. I should make one disclaimer that I'm one of those folks who believe that you don't necessarily have to have a program to do good outreach, but in public broadcasting, since we're focused on doing programming, I'm going to talk about that. We at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting have to, by legislative mandate, be concerned about audiences, and in particular a couple of audiences, and we call them unserved and underserved audiences. So that often is minority audiences, but also children. So we will often be funding projects that have outreach and content related to those audiences. Not always, but we do spend some time focusing on those audiences. I would suggest when you are thinking about doing your outreach campaign, in addition to doing concurrent development like you heard from Diana, thinking about it at the beginning of your project, which I know is really hard to do when you're trying to produce your show. You know, you're just thinking, where do I get the tape? Where do I get the camera? How much is it going to cost? But there are people that you can hire to think for you around those lines. But at least have a placeholder in your proposal that says something more than, and we will do a compelling outreach campaign. You know, there are ways to cheat that even. And, so think about customizing for your audience. And that means kind of understanding what your goals and objectives will be for your outreach campaign. Who are you after? Why are you after them? What are the message points you want to give? I do believe that every program does not deserve an outreach campaign. Sometimes it's just a program, and that's good, and it's a good thing. You know, 60 minutes of entertainment or 60 minutes of enlightenment or insight is okay. Some projects cry out for outreach because the material within the product, the program, needs more clarification, needs more edification, needs to connect to some other things you know, needs to send you someplace else. And that's kind of at least my litmus for why you would do an outreach campaign around a program. There are sometimes content so important, so essential, and so complex that you can't do it all in the 60-minute or 90-minute program, and therefore you need other vehicles that will help engage your audience, get additional information out, provide balance and objectivity to the story, those kinds of things. So I do distinguish between community outreach and educational outreach. Your program is a perfect example of needing an educational outreach campaign, especially in a world where music education and arts education is diminished. How do you connect audiences to that, specifically, you know, K through 12 or high school audiences to music? Community outreach, on the other hand, is most often the kind of programs that I am involved with, like the Legacy Project, for instance, or Two Towns of Jasper, which I want to talk about a little bit, or a project that we funded outreach for last year called The Forgetting, which looked at the phenomenon of Alzheimer's. When I gave funding to The Forgetting, I did for outreach. When I went back and recommended it, I didn't give it. It's not Cheryl Head's money. It's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's money. So when I went back to recommend we give some funding for this project, it was based on a 5-minute trailer that I saw about that program, and that's all. But within the trailer, I saw terrific characters who were compelling. I saw the hint that the producer knew how to weave a story together, because if you can weave it together in 5 minutes, you got a better chance of being able to weave it together with an arc that's going to keep people with you for 60 minutes or 90 minutes. And I also was watching it in a room with other people who I saw reacting to it. So it was one of the cases where I went up to the producer. It was Betsy Arledge, but she wasn't in the room. It was the executive producer, Naomi Boak. And I said, "Dude, do you have money for this?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Ooh, do you have money for the outreach?" And she said, "Yeah." MetLife Foundation had put in several $1 million in the project. And so I said to her, "Well, if you find out you've got more demand for your outreach than you have money, just give me a call." So 2 weeks later, she called and said that there were more stations and more audiences who wanted to be involved in this. But it was really based on seeing that small trailer that I knew that this would have some impact beyond broadcast. That particular outreach focused on giving additional information to caregivers, millions and millions of caregivers, 3 times more million people who have Alzheimer's have caregivers surrounding them, and people who feel left out, at their wits' end. It's a lingering disease. Where are the resources? Who are my support groups? And so the outreach focused on reaching those audiences, giving them really definite tools to work with, and bringing them together. And so that was a very simple, specific goal for that project, and that was well thought out by the executive producer. Two Towns of Jasper is a slightly different scenario. Again, a very compelling story because of the way the producers had gone after the story of James Byrd's dragging death in Jasper, Texas. And what year was that? In the 80s? Late
no, it was 98.
98. But Whitney Dow and Marco Williams had taken 2 crews out, one white producer with the white crew and one black producer with the black crew, and they went to that town, which is very polarized. And the black crew interviewed all the black people, and the white crew interviewed all the white people. And they thought that would give them more sincere and honest responses from the interviewing, which I think it did. So it was already a compelling storyline. CPB already had put production money into it. But I was at Sundance with Robert and Pat and Kara, and I think Ellen was there, and they were talking about doing the outreach for that project. And so did I offer, or did somebody ask? I offered, somebody asked that we do a meeting at CPB just to have all the partners come together and the logical other outreach partners come together and talk about that. And out of that meeting, you guys went off and did your work, and you came up with a very long, complex, but I think, very successful outreach campaign that combined community screenings, community materials to spark and trigger discussion of the important issues and important findings around their program. But that was a case where Whitney and Marco, the producers, they were just like, "I want to produce the show. We've been producing it for 5 years. I'm sick of being with this guy. We've been editing for 18 months. And they really didn't, we had to, somebody pushed them to outreach, really. And I think they got pushed when someone said, "Well, I think we can get some money for this. I think Ford Foundation wants to give some money for this." And they were both, yeah. So, I mean, producers, and I don't blame any producer for not wanting to do this, because it takes, producing's a full-time job, as you know. But there are good outreach practitioners, at least in the public broadcasting world and beyond, who can do the work for you. Many of them in this room, including Robert and Ellen Schneider, who's in the back, and Judy and Ken Ravitz, who are here, who I hope you will tap their brains and their information. These are people who will have you see the passion that Robert has, or the passion that Diana has for these projects. You think it's your project, Judith has passion because it's her baby, her healthy baby, Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And Robert gets the same kind of fire about a project, and and so do others. So they can be found on the National Center for Outreach website that Diana told you about. NCO is one of the partners that we use in public broadcasting to help us do our work. They're located in Madison, Wisconsin. They have a very robust website that has lots of tools for helping you to think about outreach, including the impact of outreach. What does that say?
You're in great shape.
Okay. One of the things we're thinking about in public broadcasting is how to measure the impact of your outreach. I think Joy referenced that people want to know that you're really making a difference. It's not enough just I screened it in 90 cities. what happened when you screened it, who's talking about it, who's still talking about it, whose life was transformed, who took another action. Those kinds of things are important to us. The NCO is doing some seminal work that they started with the Forgetting in identifying metrics around outreach impact. And we're going to be rolling that out during the course of 2005. I just want to take a few minutes and talk about the other partners who are helping us in the work and who do give some monies for outreach, usually not independent of your project, but if you have a project, they will give you outreach funding and support. Starting with the ITVS, the Independent Television Service in San Francisco. All these URLs are going to be on this little notebook. I put some out on the front table, about a dozen of them, and the URLs are listed here.
And they're also either are, I believe they all are on the resources page for this conference on our website.
That's excellent. And ITVS funds independent productions, but also has a small staff that will help you think through what is the outreach strategy around your program. And sometimes there will be no outreach strategy, but the ones they think are viable, like currently, like New Americans, and currently a program called Country Boys, and a new program called A Lion in the House, which is about pediatric cancer. Those kind of big footprint projects. Also, the minority consortia are funded by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They are the Latino Public Broadcasting Organization, the National Asian American Telecommunications Association, the Native American Public Telecommunications Group, the National Black Programming Consortia, and the Pacific Islanders in Communications. Now, they fund programs for and about their specific communities, but all of them are very focused on outreach because they know, like we all do, that the audiences from their constituents groups are not necessarily mainstream public television audiences, and so the outreach has to be customized and localized to reach those audiences. And that means sometimes you don't take your 90-minute film into a church auditorium and show the whole thing. That means maybe you take 15 minutes of your program and then you begin a discussion about it, and that will lead to the interest of that audience in coming to see your program. And then finally, the National Center for Outreach, which Diana mentioned. I can't say enough good things about them. Lean, Mean Machines will consult with you. They have been working primarily with stations in our system and outside partners, but are now, this year, focusing on their relationship with producers. So I suggest you do call them.
You didn't even need this
Outreach Fund, I should say.
Go. You got it.
CPB has an outreach fund that is set, and I want to, at this point, introduce my colleague, Angela Palmer, because she's the manager of this fund. Would you stand up, Angie? Stand up, Angie. Don't look around like you don't know who I'm talking about. She has business cards, and you should get one of them. The Outreach Fund is giving out funding to programs that already are going to be broadcast on the primetime schedule of public broadcasting. So I know that leaves a lot of people out, but for those of you it doesn't leave out, we're looking at really viable, innovative outreach strategies tied to specific goals and objectives, and some evaluation of what you will do and what audiences you will reach. And we're giving grants in the range of $100,000 to $250,000 for these projects. So it is www.cpb.org/outreach fund, or www.cpb.org/outreach. And Angela Palmer, 202-879-9643.
I love it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think
What
you
is
should
it?
give that number again.
9643. She'd be happy to talk to you.
879-9643.
Thank you.